All right, so today we're going deep on something I think is super relevant to pretty much anyone building a business.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and that's how to make that business really valuable.
Mm.
Like what are the things that actually drive value?
Yeah.
And we've got a really cool source to help us unpack this whole thing. It's a LinkedIn newsletter called Value Creation Engines
Okay.
by a guy named Daryl Amy. He's a value creation advisor.
I've heard of them. Yeah.
Yeah, and what's so interesting about this newsletter and about Daryl's perspective is
Mm.
that he comes at this from the angle of, like, if you were going to sell your business, what would make it the most attractive to a potential buyer?
Right.
So it's not just about profits today, it's about building something with lasting worth.
Absolutely. And that's a really key distinction because so many businesses, I think, get caught up in that short term, what can we do to boost profits this quarter or this year? And they kind of miss the bigger picture.
Right.
And speaking of bigger picture, Daryl Amy, he's got some serious credentials. He's a certified exit planning advisor, also an accredited valuation analyst.
Wow.
So he really knows his stuff when it comes to assessing the true worth of a business.
So he's not just talking theory here. He's actually out there helping people do this, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and his newsletter is full of these practical strategies for boosting what he calls enterprise value.
Okay, so enterprise value, that sounds important. What exactly does that mean?
It's basically the overall value of the entire business, not just the physical assets, like your equipment or your inventory, but it includes things like your brand reputation, the strength of your team,
Gotcha.
and of course the potential for future earnings. So it's really taking a holistic view of what makes a company valuable.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and one of the things that really struck me about Daryl's approach is the emphasis he puts on company culture.
Really? That's not usually the first thing you think of when you talk about business valuation.
I know, right? You'd think it'd be all about, financials and marketing and things like that. But Daryl argues that culture is actually one of the most overlooked drivers of value.
Interesting.
And I mean, think about it. A company with a toxic culture, high turnover, low morale, that's going to be a huge red flag for any potential buyer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas a company with a thriving culture where people are engaged and motivated and aligned with the company's mission, that's going to be way more attractive, right?
Yeah, totally. It's like you want to buy into a company where people actually want to be there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it signals something really powerful about the health and the long-term potential of the business.
And I bet it affects everything from productivity to customer service to innovation, right?
Absolutely. And Daryl has this great line in one of his newsletters. It's called "Strategy is the breakfast of champion cultures,"
Love that.
which I think perfectly captures this idea that a strong culture doesn't just happen by accident. You have to be intentional about building it, and it starts with a clear and shared strategy.
So the strategy is like the foundation, and the culture is what grows from that.
Yeah, exactly. And when you have that strong foundation, you can create a culture that really supports and amplifies your strategic goals.
I'm starting to see how this all ties together.
Yeah, and another key piece of the puzzle that Daryl talks about is process optimization.
Okay, break that down for me. What exactly is process optimization?
So it's essentially about making your business run as smoothly and efficiently as possible, like a well-oiled machine.
Got it.
It's about reducing waste, automating tasks, refining workflows, really anything you can do to improve efficiency and productivity.
Sounds kind of boring, but I guess it makes sense.
It might sound boring, but it can have a huge impact on your bottom line and ultimately on your valuation.
Right.
Because when you have efficient processes, you're able to deliver products or services faster at lower cost, which obviously leads to higher profit.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
And there are all sorts of methodologies and frameworks you can use for process optimization, like Lean or Six Sigma. But the basic idea is to constantly be looking for ways to eliminate waste, streamline operations, and make things run more smoothly.
Okay, so culture, processes, we're starting to build a picture here of what makes a business really valuable.
Yeah, and this all ties into another point that Daryl makes, which is that a lot of business owners don't invest enough time in preparing to actually sell their company.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, wouldn't you think that's kind of the end goal for a lot of entrepreneurs?
You'd think so, but according to Daryl's newsletter, a staggering 81% of business owners don't adequately prepare for their exit.
81%.
Yeah.
What's holding them back?
Well, I think part of it is that they get so caught up in the day-to-day running of the business
Yeah.
that they don't take the time to step back and think about the long term. What do I want my exit to look like? What steps can I take now to make my business more attractive to potential buyers?
Right, so it's like they're so focused on the trees that they miss the forest.
Exactly. And I think it also comes back to this idea of aligning your business goals with long-term value creation.
Okay, unpack that a bit more for me.
So it's about thinking beyond just profits and revenue and instead focusing on building a sustainable business that has intrinsic value, something that someone will be willing to pay a premium for down the road.
So it's almost like you're building an asset, not just a business.
Yeah, exactly. And that requires a different mindset. It requires thinking about things like brand building, intellectual property, building a strong team, and of course, fostering that positive company culture we talked about.
Makes sense. So if you know you might sell your business someday, you build it differently from the ground up.
Exactly. You're playing the long game. And one of the biggest challenges that Daryl highlights in his newsletter is
Yeah.
setting long-term vision.
Yeah, that's always tough. It's hard enough just planning for next quarter, let alone 10 years down the road.
I know, right? But Daryl argues that having that long-term vision is crucial for creating a truly valuable business because it helps you to make those strategic decisions that will pay off in the long run.
Okay, but how do you actually do that? How do you set a 10-year vision when the world is changing so fast?
It's definitely not easy, but there are frameworks and tools that can help. One that Daryl mentions is scenario planning.
I've heard of that. What's
Yeah.
the basic idea?
So you basically imagine different potential futures for your industry and for the world in general, like best case, worst case, middle of the road.
Okay.
And then you work backward from each of those scenarios to figure out what steps you need to take today to be prepared for those different futures.
So it's kind of like a choose your own adventure, but for your business.
Exactly. Yeah. And it forces you to think about those long-term trends and to make decisions that are aligned with your desired outcome, even if it's 10 years down the road.
I love that idea. It's like reverse engineering your success.
Exactly. And, Daryl is great at coming up with these catchy titles for his newsletter articles, too.
Yeah, they're definitely attention grabbing.
Like one that I saw recently was 3 Q4 Rocks to Accelerate Your Business into 2025.
That does make you want to click and find out more.
Right. He's got a real knack for making these topics engaging and accessible, even if you're not, a seasoned business expert.
Totally. So I think the big takeaway here is that building a valuable business is about so much more than just focusing on profits.
Yeah.
It's about culture, it's about processes, it's about having that long-term vision, and it's about understanding what actually drives enterprise value.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's
Yeah.
about building something that's truly sustainable and has lasting worth.
Exactly. So as we wrap up here, I'm curious, what's one thing that really stuck with you from this deep dive into Daryl Amy's work?
I think the thing that really resonated with me is the emphasis on culture. Because it's something that's often overlooked, but it's so foundational to everything else.
Absolutely.
And if I were starting a business today, that's where I would put my focus from day one. Building a strong, positive, purpose-driven culture, because I think that's ultimately what attracts and retains top talent, drives innovation, and creates a truly valuable business.
Well said. And for our listeners out there, I encourage you to check out Daryl Amy's Value Creation Engines newsletter on LinkedIn for yourself. He's got tons of great insights and practical advice on how to build a business that's not just profitable, but truly valuable. And that wraps up our deep dive for today.
Thanks for having me.
It's great having you. All
Yeah.
right, till next time.
Bye.
See ya.